The endless dark of the universe is yours, if you but reach out to take it. Yield nothing, the void respects only strength. From Seren Travius, a rogue trader. Rogue traders, originally called Rogue Traders Militant during the era of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, are unique and powerful human individuals who serve as a combination freelance explorer, conquistador, and interstellar merchant for the Imperium of Man. They are hereditary imperial servants and nobles, given a starship, a crew, and sometimes a contingent of space marines, in very rare cases, or troops of the Astra Militarum and carte blanche to roam those worlds of the galaxy that still lie beyond imperial control or knowledge. In their task of exploring and exploiting the still uncharted regions of the galaxy for mankind, rogue traders might come across worlds harboring long-forgotten human civilizations which will be later incorporated into the Imperium by official Adeptus Mechanicus explorator fleets and expeditions of the Imperial Navy and Astra Militarum. Other times, they find empty or alien-dominated planets ripe for colonization, conquest, or exploitation by the Imperium and themselves. The bearer of a sacred warrant of trade that empowers them to journey beyond the boundaries of the Imperium to trade, explore, and make war in the God Emperor's name. A rogue trader is a unique figure in the grim darkness of the Imperium. They may be a newly entitled power on the rise, or hail from a long lineage of nobles and voidfarers, but all bear their titles with pride, striking out into the unknown in search of fortune and glory. A rogue trader is a power unto themselves in the dark voids, master of all they survey, at least as far as their force of arms and sharpness of wits can press the claim. A rogue trader can be many things, but whether standing as a diplomat before a planetary ruler, cutting a shadow deal in a void station undercity, bellowing orders amidst an armed host set upon plunder, or striding the bridge of a mighty starship, they remain one thing above all: free. Often, they come from a dynasty of great leaders and visionary commanders with a renowned or darkly infamous lineage stretching back standard millennia. Other times, they are from younger, more dynamic families, often coming from the ranks of the Adeptus Terra, the Imperial Navy, or the Astra Militarum. Now, whatever their origins, all of them are first and foremost masters of their own fate, and upon their shoulders can rest the success or failure not only of their endeavors and their bloodlines, but of countless future generations and often the fortunes of entire worlds. Despite the fact that the weight of such responsibility is theirs to bear alone, a rogue trader invariably surrounds themselves with a coterie of allies and retainers. No rogue trader can undertake their mission alone, for no man or woman can be master of every single aspect of trade, exploration, exploitation, and war. As a result, all of the most successful ones have the ingrained ability to recognize the value of others and their motivations, and as a leader are able to utilize every weapon and ability in the human arsenal to their full potential. Though they must rely on others for the most specialized of skills, not to mention certain needful resources, it falls to them to know how and when to exercise their own judgment and how to delegate where needed. They may not steer the helm of their void cruiser nor fire and aim every macro cannon in person, but the trader selects and commands those who do, and it is their orders that are obeyed. Likewise, they may know little of the arcane rites of the augury and auspex, but it is ultimately their decision whether or not to trust the word of the explorator who claims it's safe to breathe the air of a newly discovered world. They must always look to their own abilities and protection, regardless of the power of their allies, for there will always be those envious of their power and station, and countless rivals to their goals. As a result, most have a penchant for the very finest personal weapons and equipment their fortunes can acquire, for even friends can soon become enemies when a world's ransom is at stake. Some never leave their bridge without donning an ancient and revered suit of artificer armor, while others secret fiendishly cunning personal force field generators of alien manufacture beneath a gaudy uniform. None are ever unarmed, bearing even aboard their own vessels minute digital weapons and other implements of destruction. However, they outwardly comport themselves. Rogue traders must be supremely confident in their own abilities and able to walk away from even the most desperate situation, somehow having profited from their perilous adventure, even if that profit must be counted purely by survival. I claim this world in the name of the Emperor of Man and his Imperium. I bring justice and truth for the loyal, punishment and death for the guilty, and the spoils I take by my own hand. From Ancelion Aquer, Lord Captain of the Celestis Imperium. The Imperium of Man is a vast, scattered realm, extending over almost the entire galaxy, impinging itself upon the more compact areas of alien-settled space. The million or more human-inhabited worlds the Imperium controls are but a tiny fraction of the galactic whole. Then there are the fringes and halo zones, remote areas where the Astronomicon does not reach, and where the only human settlers are renegades or pioneering groups whose ancestors were forgotten by the Emperor's servants millennia ago. Most of the Milky Way galaxy remains unexplored, unknown, and extremely dangerous, even in the late 41st millennium. The potential of new worlds, alien civilizations, and unimaginable resources made necessary a class of free-ranging Imperial agents known as rogue traders. Licensed and often equipped by the Adeptus Terra, the rogue trader is free to explore the far regions of the galaxy, the areas where the Astronomicon does not reach, and those areas within its reach as yet unvisited by humanity. They have even attempted to cross the great starless voids of intergalactic space, but over such distances, even Astropath's powers of psychic communication are useless, and whether such missions have succeeded is unknown. Operating in isolation from the central authority of the Imperium, the rogue traders must decide for themselves how to react to alien cultures, new discoveries and threats. If they judge an intelligent Xenos race to be potentially dangerous, they may attempt to destroy it or to gather as much information as they can so that others may do so. If they decide a Xenos race may be of use to humanity, they may attempt to make contact and establish relations. If merely rich in technology or minerals, a planet may be plundered, and the rogue trader will return to Terra laden with the treasures of space, alien artifacts, rare and precious minerals, and undreamed-of technologies. Needless to say, the rogue trader requires a considerable resource in spacecraft, troops, and other stuff if they are to complete their mission. Their total responsibility may extend to dozens of voidcraft, often huge, lumbering cargo vessels crammed with a small army, a full crew of technicians and volunteer settlers to establish colonies on new worlds. Most important, however, are the fighting troops, for it is they who will have to deal with any potential threat. Many traders are individuals who have reached a position of power within the Imperium's governing hierarchy. These individuals are drawn from the ranks of the Adeptus Terra, the Imperial Navy, and Astra Militarum, or even the Inquisition. A few are influential civilians, amongst whom the Navigators are the most famous. Politics sometimes obliges this cause, for free of Imperial command, the rogue trader is also conveniently out of the way, beyond the center of real power in the Emperor's realm. They have a reputation as outcasts. Many are people whom the high-ranking officials of the Adeptus Terra's myriad branches deem better kept at a safe distance from the throne world. Operating beyond Imperial control, they are a law unto themselves. Some are highly pious individuals, bringing the God Emperor's light beyond the edges of his rule. Others are nothing more than glorified pirates and scoundrels. Many of them exude confidence and are highly charismatic, often charming and roguish, skilled diplomats, some would say confident tricksters, and hardened killers when the situation demands. They will often gather an entourage of hangers-on and companions, and this may contain alien warriors, mutants, and other undesirables unacceptable in polite Imperial society. Many Puritans in the Inquisition would take to marking the rogue trader out as a heretic. Many traders have highly unstable personalities. Some destroy worlds on a whim, or experiment with alien species out of a macabre curiosity. All of them are highly exceptional individuals who are driven to success beyond the dreams of the ordinary men and women of the Imperium of Man, even though these exceptional people often have extreme character quirks themselves. Some destroy entire worlds for the slightest of reasons, or include alien warriors and mutants among their entourage in direct violation of Imperial orthodoxy. Some are highly pious servants of the God Emperor, while others are no more than legitimized pirates. The most infamous rogue trader was Jan van Jastobal, who became little more than an officially sanctioned desperado, plundering whatever world he came upon. Rogue traders are often flamboyant individuals, commonly dressed in the most extravagant finery they can acquire. However, each one is a unique individual from a particular background. Some newly created traders come from origins in the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, the Merchant Fleet, the Administratum, or even the Imperial Inquisition, where they will have developed unique outlooks, skills, and approaches to different situations. Some of them are relatively poor, possessing a single ancient and dilapidated starship. Others are incredibly wealthy and powerful and have whole fleets of warships and entire private armies at their disposal. Certain favored individuals may even call upon detachments of space marines, having entered mutually beneficial pacts with individual chapters. Some rogue traders operate as mercenaries, renting the service of their ship or ships to the highest bidder, including pirates, other rogue traders, or an imperial organization like the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Astra Militarum, or the Inquisition. Their beginnings. The rogue traders had their origins in the demands of the early days of the Great Crusade of the late 30th millennium. Driven by the will of the Emperor, the first expeditionary fleets of the Crusade pushed outwards into the galaxy. Preceding each great expeditionary fleet of hundreds, sometimes thousands of vessels, often ranged smaller contingents of independent flotillas led by a class of martial leader that would become known as the Rogue Traders Militant. Many of these individuals were former rulers of the numerous realms the Emperor had cast down, first during the Unification Wars on Terra, and later, as the Great Crusade spread, formerly independent human worlds. They were offered a stark choice: bend the knee before the Emperor and swear service to the Great Crusade, or die by his hand. Though many set pride before what they regarded as slavery, others chose service and took up the Emperor's Warrant of Trade. There was a price, however. The Rogue Traders Militant were expected to scout ahead of the leading edge of the Great Crusade, accompanied by their own armies as well as whatever assets had been ceded them by the Emperor. Operating so far ahead of the Emperor's crusading armies, they could expect little or no aid should they encounter foes too powerful for them to overcome. After several solar decades penetrating the inky black of the void, rogue trader militant fleets often appeared as ramshackle vagabonds, many of their starships taken from defeated enemies, sometimes including Xenos vessels of entirely novel or esoteric form. They were forbidden to return to Terra, for in his wisdom the Emperor sought not to just rid himself of powerful rivals, but to ensure that even in their deaths they might serve mankind. Many vanished alone and unheralded, slain, consumed, or enslaved by nameless Xenos abominations far from the light of Terra. The Era Indomitus. In the wake of the birth of the Great Rift, nearly 100 rogue traders were invited to Mackridge for an emergency symposium. The summons bore the seal of Robert Guillerman, the resurrected Primarch of the Ultramarines, Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, and thus was an honor no one in the Imperium could refuse. From this magnificent beginning would stem a truly hellish journey. It had been many thousands of Terran years since so many traders were gathered in one location. It was rare enough for a handful to meet. Many of the assembled had guessed the purpose of the quorum by the time they had arrived, for Ultramar had been ravaged by war. The sovereign domain of the Ultramarines chapter, once thought inviolable given its peerless infrastructure and many-layered defenses, had been broken open and brought to ruin on a dozen fronts by the demon Primarch Mortarion and his Death Guard during the conflicts known as the Plague Wars. Though Guilliman had returned following the end of the Indomitor's crusade to lead a masterful defense of his realm, the aftermath would take solar decades, if not standard centuries, to resolve. Many of the rogue traders genuflected as the Primarch entered the halls, but Guilliman bid them stand. He spoke to them as equals, as was his way. The Primarch claimed that the Imperium was not just being invaded, but locked in a struggle for its spirit as much as its body. The realm of Ultramar had been afflicted with plagues, each supernatural in origin and voracious in its spread. Before the invading forces of chaos had been driven back to the Scourge stars, a trio of conquered Imperial star systems, many of the moons and planets under Guilliman's rule had been racked by the spore of Nurgle, the dark god that Mortarion and his fallen traitor legion called Lord and Master. During the Indomitor's crusade, Guilliman had travelled across the war-riven galaxy and seen his father's empire in flames. He knew every resource would be needed to save mankind, and even as he took the fight to humanity's enemies, his statesman-like mind dwelled on how the Imperium would recover from its losses. To this end, he knew the rogue traders would be vital. The traders that he had selected were to fight for the Imperium's future, not as warriors or bureaucrats, but as pioneers. The front line upon which they would face their destiny was not that of the battlefield, but of deep and uncharted space. They were to find new worlds to conquer in the name of the Emperor, fresh lands upon which mankind could settle and thrive. While warp storms had cut off much of the galaxy in the wake of the Cicatrix Maledictum's birth, they had also opened up never-before-explored routes upon the fringes of Imperial space. There could be found opportunity, hope, and such danger that meant many of the rogue traders would never return. Guilliman gave those gathered at the symposium on Macridge the opportunity to leave, to walk away without a strain on their honor, for it was a perilous task he proposed. Since the opening of the Great Rift, the Astronomicon had been occluded more than ever, and the creatures of the warp seemed to haunt every space lane and distant moon. And yet, none of those assembled took a backward step. Some remained out of pride, some out of duty, some out of a sense of adventure. But all were to find themselves set on a new path that would see them meet either victory or inglorious damnation. Within solar days, the fleets of the rogue traders had left the realm of Ultramar, bound for the yawning reaches of space beyond the eastern fringe and the extremities of the Ultima Segmentum's spiral arm. Most carried in their holds large populations of Ultramaran colonists kept in cryogenic hyperfreeze, seeking a new and better life somewhere else. Out there were the youngest stars in the galaxy, those most likely to have untouched planets in their orbits, and therefore most likely to have habitable lands. That all hope to find territories unspoiled by the ravages of chaos was an unspoken truth. Each rogue trader fleet took a different heading, their navigators guiding them through the warp towards destinations unknown. They all underwent challenges upon the way, and some found nothing but cruel and violent ends. The Imperial legal status. The most valuable possession of a rogue trader is his or her Imperial Warrant of Trade, an ancient legal document which describes and sanctions the accepted limits of a rogue trader and his descendants' operations across the galaxy. These charters are hereditary and thus create an entire rogue trader dynasty when they are issued. These dynasties are granted a personal coat of arms, identifying their members amongst the Imperial nobility. The traders are empowered with the authority by the High Lords of Terra to travel freely within the Imperium and beyond. This allows them to legally interact with cultures which normal Imperial citizens are forbidden contact with because they are non-Imperial human worlds or Xenos-controlled planets. Not only that, but rogue traders are granted the permission and freedom to deal with these cultures as they see fit, so long as it is judged to be in the interests of the Imperium. Having said that, it can be assumed that a renegade rogue trader guilty of heresy, treason, will be severely prosecuted by the Inquisition if discovered and captured. His punishment will be that much more severe if he is deemed undeserving of the Emperor's extraordinary trust in his family. Traders usually return to Imperial space every few Terran years to unload their exotic wares and resupply, recruit, and rest until the next foray into the darkness of unknown space. During these periods, they may come into conflict with members of the Adeptus Terra or the Inquisition. The traders wield incredible power, and it is easy for them to forget that once back within the Imperium, they do not have free rein to act as they wish. This strident attitude will draw attention from the authorities. Many rogue traders dispute the right of the Imperium to exercise authority over them. As individuals who have wandered amongst alien stars and conversed with all manner of cultures, rogue traders are viewed as susceptible to all kinds of heresies, from wayward philosophies to infection by alien creatures or possession by warp entities that live in the darkness between stars. All of these factors can lead to violent confrontation, particularly if the rogue trader has knowledge or an artifact that others within the Imperial hierarchy of equal or greater power covet. The Rogue Trader Origins. No two rogue traders are exactly alike, but all are exceptional individuals with a drive and personal ambition that sets them far above the teeming ranks of humanity. They come from a wide range of backgrounds, but all appear fettered or cursed by the title they bear. The Imperial Navy. A great many traders have served in the Imperial Navy. This is hardly surprising, as they are expected to command entire armadas of void ships, and few would wish to delegate such responsibility to a subordinate. As a consequence, many rogue traders are exceptionally skilled captains of their vessels and admirals of their fleets, able, even keen, to take on enemies the likes of which may never have been encountered by the Imperium and emerge victorious. Many would have been considered mavericks by their contemporaries in the Imperial Navy, for their methods and tactics might run contrary to the doctrines of space combat taught at the Segmentum fortresses. Those whose ideas genuinely are too extreme tend not to survive long, though the manner of their death might form the basis of legend and rumor for many Terran centuries to come. Those with a genuine talent, even one based on ideas the Imperial Navy could never fully endorse, might go on to achieve great things once released from the service of the notoriously conservative Imperial military establishment. Many rogue traders who once served in the Imperial Navy maintain a network of contacts across the sector in which they served, and beyond. As such, they might be able to call upon old friends, perhaps individuals they served beside as officer cadets. Such contacts can provide all manner of aid when really needed, from emergency supplies to official Imperial help against pirate or alien attack. Most traders prefer to get by on their own skills, and only call in such favors when things get desperate. Many prefer not to call in a favor from an old contact recently made a Commodore when that same individual might one day be a High Admiral and therefore able to provide even greater aid. Rogue traders from a naval background often maintain the trappings of their former rank, ornamented with all manner of additional finery. Thus, they might wear a formal dress code similar to that worn by a High Admiral, even if he had never attained such rank himself, complete with rows of medals and awards, gold-braided epaulettes, and meters of elaborate piping. And yet, they might wear their hair braided in the fashion of some feral world tribe, or facial tattoos in the style of an anarchic Hive City gang. Alongside a treasured Imperial Navy cutlass, he might carry a sword of unknown, yet unmistakably Xenos manufacture, or bear other weapons traded with or stolen from any one of 100 bizarre societies. The Astra Militarum. The Astra Militarum is another Imperial institution from which rogue traders may be drawn. Those who have risen above service in a single regiment to lead the vast, diverse armies of the Imperial Guard might be granted a Warrant of Trade to take their crusade beyond the borders of the Imperium's space and out into the great unknown. These individuals are not only masters of ground-based combat, but gifted in the arts of strategy. Some become great admirals as well as great generals, while others have the foresight to delegate command of their vessels to underlings, concentrating their own prodigious skills on the bigger strategic picture. Rogue traders from such a background often amass huge ground forces and use their fleets to bring these to bear in devastating planetary assaults. Beyond the reach of the Imperium, such individuals will be forced to husband their forces in a manner they may be unused to, lest they exhaust their finite resources with little or no hope of recruiting fresh troops. Should the ground forces suffer high losses, the rogue trader will be forced to recruit from those worlds they have conquered. In the case of human societies rediscovered after generations of isolation from the broader galaxy, they may establish a system of feudal duty, whereby the planet is required to send its warriors to serve in his fleets, or they may be forced to demand or coerce service in their armies. Some traders have even resorted to recruiting the services of alien mercenaries or auxiliaries, a practice highly frowned upon by the authorities of the Imperium. Out beyond the fringes, however, rogue traders are a power entirely unto themselves. Who knows what bizarre forces roam the Halo zones ostensibly in the service of the Imperium? In appearance, these militant rogue traders vary hugely. Many wear the trappings of the regiment from which they were originally drawn, which, unlike the formalized uniforms of the Imperial Navy, is often specific to the culture of the regimental homeworld. They may also wear elements of the uniforms of the Imperial General Staff, including a long, elaborate coat or peaked cap. The many who prefer to lead their conquests from the front line mix such dress in a manner more appropriate to their warrior background, combining a dress uniform with carapace armor or even power armor modified to fit a normal-sized human. As with other types of rogue traders, these individuals carry all manner of unusual weaponry, including exotic sensors and force field devices, normally only available to the upper echelons of the Inquisition or Officio Assassinorum. While the weapons carried by a rogue trader of an Imperial Navy background might be considered for show, those carried by one from an Astra Militarum background are generally more practical, far more devastating, having been handcrafted for them and covered in elegant engravings, or recovered from the body of a defeated foe and kept not only as a trophy, but valued for some uniquely destructive capability it possesses. The Administratum. Through their long and varied careers, some officers of the Administratum might amass considerable personal power, holding sway over a small empire of divisions and departments with responsibilities across dozens of planetary systems. Invariably, these men and women will be ruthless, calculating individuals who have worked their way to the very top by any means possible, crushing their foes and thwarting endless assassination attempts to stay in power. Many of these officials will have been assigned to such tasks as the suppression of a rebellious sector, or enforcing the Imperium's rule on human enclaves recently rediscovered and brought back into fold. These individuals will be masters in the precise application of power, able to bring bare any weapon at their disposal, from the military might of the Space Marines to the secret arts of political manipulation. As such, some make ideal rogue trader material. An administrator given command of a rogue trader fleet will be a politician first and a leader second, though the most successful will combine both roles or switch between the two with masterful skill. They will amass their resources and appoint leadership of the various arms of their fleet to those they not only trust, but can also destroy should they challenge the trader in any way. They will keep their underlings in perpetual competition against one another, encouraging them to seek their patronage and approval at the expense of their rivals. Unlike rogue traders of a more martial background, these men and women rarely engage in overt displays of their personal prowess, preferring instead to exert their power by way of an assassin's knife in the dark, rather than crass displays of military might. In appearance, these Machiavellian princelings often prefer to remain comparatively inconspicuous. They might wear the vestments of their former positions, such as the monkish robes of the scribe. Others wear more ornate dress, but keep the colors dark and subdued, lending them a brooding, menacing aspect and hinting at the foolishness of crossing them. They tend not to wear conspicuous weaponry, yet only a fool would assume that such an individual would be unable to defend themselves. These rogue traders always carry small, yet deadly weapons, such as digital lasers or concealed power blades, and invariably some form of personal force field that will protect from the attacks of an enemy in battle or a treacherous underling at court. The Merchants. Most of the cultures of the Imperium's worlds remain comparatively isolated, with only a handful of a planet's population ever undertaking a journey to another star system. Yet, despite this parochialism, most Imperial worlds rely on trade with those in the nearby stellar vicinity for many of their needs to be met. Weapons and other items of advanced technology must be imported from those worlds with the expertise and capacity to produce them, while such centers of industry may require rare natural resources, which must be imported. In addition, the aristocratic ruling classes of many worlds crave the exotic, often paying outrageous sums for goods imported from distant locales. Clothes, foodstuffs, jewelry, and art are all highly desirable to those who wish to make a display of their wealth and influence, whether real, imagined, or feigned in the interests of fashion. An entire imperial class has grown up over the millennia, existing solely to meet the demands of interplanetary commerce. The merchant interests of the Imperium take many forms, from cartels to federations and small concerns to mighty, galaxy-spanning corporations. Most center their efforts on a relatively small group of worlds, or a stretch of a lucrative trade route, for the fragmented and feudal nature of the Imperium does not facilitate a stable, galaxy-wide economy. For many of these merchants, trade and war are one and the same. They must protect their interests by any means possible. For some, that means maintaining small, private armies, or sponsoring mercenaries for just such a purpose. These very literal trade wars might be fought against competitors or other parties that threaten their interests, from pirates to aliens. It should come as no surprise that the most accomplished of Imperial merchant leaders are as capable generals as they are traders, applying the same doctrines to both pursuits. These persons make ideal rogue traders. Traders from a merchant background are often the most astute and successful, equally at home facing an opponent across the negotiating table as on the field of battle, though sometimes the two are one and the same. The armies and fleets they employ might be drawn from their own substantial holdings, or they might be able to call upon a complex network of obligation, drawing upon mercenaries and trading partners from across a broad spectrum of their trade. They often dress in the manner of opulent heads of state, bedecking themselves in fine jewelry, most of which is in fact some hidden weapon, force field, or sensor. They surround themselves with individuals indentured to their service before birth, drawing on familial connections that stretch back in time for many generations. Their vessels often take on the appearance of space-going palaces, crammed with all manner of outrageous ostentation. Yet, it is a foolish opponent indeed who writes off such a rogue trader as a fop or dilettante. Many, in fact, cultivate such an air, treating it as just one more weapon in a not inconsiderable arsenal. The Imperial Commanders, better known as the Planetary Governors. While most Imperial Commanders occupy a hereditary seat of power only relinquished and passed on in the event of their own death, there are those who do pass beyond even such a lofty position and take to the stars as rogue traders. The most common cause for such a change in career is that the governor has been replaced or deposed in some manner, yet remained of use to the Adeptus Terra. Perhaps an Imperial commander has lost their world to alien invasion, yet has retained a measure of their assets, such as their own planetary defense forces and fleets. Some such individuals may be appointed to rogue trader status and given the opportunity to conquer for themselves and for the Imperium a new planet. These traders may well be motivated by the need to re-establish all that they may have lost. They are commonly highly charismatic, commanding the loyalties of their dispossessed subjects. Their fleets are massive conglomerations of whatever vessels escaped the destruction of their planet, accompanied by whatever assets the Imperium might assign to them. The subjects often fight all the harder than the followers of other types of rogue trader, for they are driven by their loss and motivated by the need to claim for themselves some manner of recompense. Those not able to fight form a cadre of colonists, each with an assigned role in the society they dream of one day establishing. Such traders vary enormously in appearance and personality, but they often come to embody the culture of their lost homeworld. Local modes of fashion are exaggerated far beyond their original form, and dialects and customs are held dearly, lest they be forgotten forever. And now, the last origin, the Inquisition. Although rare, there are recorded cases of an Inquisitor being granted the Warrant of Trade and taking up the rank of Rogue Trader. The most likely reason this might occur is as a result of political maneuvering within the Inquisition itself, perhaps resulting in the outmaneuvered individual being offered the warrant as an alternative to a far less desirable outcome. Upon being granted the warrant, the Inquisitor will understand that they have no alternative but to accept, as it is most often members of the alien-hunting Ordo Xenos who find themselves being appointed as rogue traders. These individuals will be well equipped for their new career. Although no longer able to call and deny limitless resources of the Inquisition, this trader will still wield considerable powers and influence. The main difference between their old and new roles is the context. Rather than hunting out corruption and treachery within the populace of the Imperium, they will be seeking such threats out amongst alien stars, and will no doubt prosecute their new duty with as much vigor as they did their old. It is not only fully appointed Inquisitors who may become rogue traders, for their many and varied servants and acolytes might end up in such a position too. Those servants of lower rank would consider themselves fortunate indeed to be made a rogue trader, for the alternatives are often too terrible to dwell upon should the true price for whatever deed has earned their elevation be exacted. The Warrant of Trade. It should be noted that although rogue traders are shipmasters who travel the vastness of space, their authority to do so comes not from a merchant charter, as usually granted by the Administratum to the chartist captains of the Imperial merchant fleets, but rather a letter of appointment known as a Warrant of Trade, that elevates them to a level of imperial authority and status equaling that held by Space Marine chapter masters, inquisitors, and imperial planetary governors. Some of the more ancient warrants are dated from the very beginnings of the Imperium, and some were even signed by the Emperor himself. Others were signed by the Primarchs or other leaders of the Great Crusade. These charters are very valuable and give their owners great leeway. They are tailor-made and unique. A rogue trader's authority cannot be appealed, since it comes directly from the Emperor, as according to Imperial law and Imperial religious dogma, no one is empowered to overrule those persons who have received the God Emperor's direct sanction. Certain powerful lords of the Adeptus Terra offer warrants of trade as a bribe to their rivals. The rival simply walks away into a life of adventure and wealth, and no longer causes trouble for their political opponents in the various imperial organizations. Letters of marque are similar documents to warrants of trade that have been issued more recently by the Imperium to less powerful individuals, though their bearers are still called rogue traders. The letters of marque are rather restricted in some aspects and controlled more effectively by imperial authorities. These restrictions may be of geographical nature. The rogue trader is restricted to operating in a single sector, or something similar. The more recent letters of marque are also not hereditary. Hopeful heirs must return and reapply to the High Lords of Terra through the Administratum for a new charter. Though a warrant of trade or letter of marque grants extraordinary freedoms within the Imperium, they also invariably contain particular conditions. Sometimes rogue traders will be required to make regular visits to certain troublesome imperial worlds, or sent to enact military action on worlds which do not require the full force of the imperial navy's segmentum and sector battle fleets. More often, however, they will be required to travel outside the established territories of the Imperium in the name of settlement or exploration of new worlds that do not yet know the blessings of the God Emperor. The granting of a warrant of trade. The warrant of trade is the instrument by which a rogue trader is granted their lofty position and the legal method by which they exercise their considerable powers. New warrants are granted on the highest of authorities, usually by the office of the High Lords of Terra themselves, and by extension, the Emperor. The issuing of a warrant is an occasion of great significance, marked by extravagant pomp and ceremony, for it marks the establishment of a new, noble line that, should the recipient prove successful, might conquer and rule entire regions of space in the name of the Imperium, thus expanding mankind's domains. They are issued for many reasons. Some are granted in recognition of a great service done to the Imperium, while others are created for entirely political ends. Rogue trader warrants are hereditary. Once one is issued, it will be passed down from one generation to the next, at least for as long as there are heirs extant to receive it. Many trader lines die out, and yet more are created to replace them, ensuring a constant supply of individuals driven to expand the Imperium's holdings. Now, the reasons for granting a Warrant of Trade include the following. Military service. One of the most common circumstances under which a Warrant of Trade is offered is in recognition of military service to the Imperium. In a galaxy at war on 1,000 different fronts, Lord Generals and High Admirals lead dozens of mighty Imperial crusades to retake entire regions lost to rebellion or alien invasion. Such mighty leaders have under their command millions of warriors and hundreds of warships, and over the course of a crusade lasting solar decades, they might claim dozens of planets in the name of the Emperor. Those individuals who succeed will be honored at the very highest levels, decorated with a multitude of medals, have victory parades, high days and celebrations held in their name, and even have whole planets named after them. Such men and women rarely retire having completed their life's work, however, and they are often restless and uncomfortable in non-military circles. The boundless and untamable energies of such leaders are best put to good use, and appointment to the rank of rogue trader comes to many as a welcome outlet that can benefit the Imperium. Political expediency. Just as some servants of the Imperium are granted the Warrant of Trade in genuine thanks and recognition for their services to mankind, others are granted the rank because the alternative would be far worse. Throughout history, men and women granted leadership over a crusade fleet have conquered in the name of the Imperium, only to establish themselves as rulers of the new realms. Sometimes these leaders have maintained at least a semblance of fealty to the Imperium, with the Adeptus Terra accepting the new regime so long as tithes are paid and other obligations met. Yet, on many other occasions, these rulers have become so accustomed to absolute power that they desire to hold onto it for all time, rejecting their imperial masters and setting themselves up as total rulers of the regions they have fought so hard to conquer. The only recourse in such a situation is yet another imperial crusade to dislodge the pretender. Far better, then, to avoid the situation entirely by keeping the conqueror distracted with yet more regions to conquer, leaving the administrators of the Adeptus Terra to complete the pacification in their wake. Many a warrant of trade has been granted in order that a Lord Militant might simply conquer region after region until they have expended their forces and are no longer a political threat, real or potential, to the wider Imperium. Self-promotion. To have risen to a position of influence and power within the labyrinthine structures of the Imperium's bureaucracy, an individual must, by the force of their own personality, be exceptionally driven. Just to be noticed amongst the teeming billions of the Imperium, one must be willing to promote oneself with ruthless efficiency. The types of people that attain such lofty stations might be noble and self-sacrificing, but it is just as likely they are ignoble and self-serving. For those of rank, a multitude of ways exists to attain every conceivable personal ambition, and for some, the Warrant of Trade is that ultimate goal. Just why a highly placed official would desire the Warrant of Trade will depend on their own particular, sometimes flawed personality, and the manner in which they attain it will depend on their circumstance, or on situations they can engineer. More than likely, it will involve prodigious bribes at the very highest of levels, or on calling in outstanding debts and favors from every possible source. Once the warrant is granted to such a person, they will be keen to use it to attain their every ambition. Some will desire to carve small stellar empires beyond the reach of the Imperium, while others may want to establish the foundations of a mighty noble lineage, even if they themselves will not be around to see how future generations prosper. It has often been noted that many rogue traders are vain and egotistical, and that many more are simply venal and megalomaniacal. And the last, virtual exile. Some individuals, by means fair and foul, attain high rank in the service of the Imperium by politicking or murdering their way to the very top. Over the course of a lifetime, extended far beyond the natural span of human years by rare and expensive rejuvenation procedures, such a person will have come into conflict with all manner of political opponents, earning the bitter enmity of the few others he can count as peers. It may come to pass that such an individual stands at the very brink of the culmination of a lifetime's political maneuvering, and an appointment to sector governor or even High Lord of Terror is the only remaining rung on the ladder left to climb. At such times, it may be that an individual's many political rivals mobilize against them, drawing on every shred of their own influence to rid themselves of their enemy once and for all. Yet, being too powerful to oust, some in this position find a warrant of trade foisted upon them as a convenient way of getting rid of them once and for all. Such an honor cannot be refused, and the newly appointed rogue trader has no choice but to accept their fate, demurring politely as speeches are made in honor of all the great deeds they will perform in this, their ultimate service to the Imperium that appreciates them so. For these rogue traders, the Warrant of Trade is a bitter reward, for it signals the victory of their political opponents. Despite the unwanted nature of the warrant, These traders do often go on to achieve great success, reaving across the stars, conquering dozens of planets, and amassing personal fortune far in excess of what they might have attained otherwise. Some of these individuals return solar decades later to enact their revenge on their erstwhile opponents, perhaps waiting until the key conspirators have retired to some private garden world paradise before dispatching an assassin, or indeed a private army, to settle the matter once and for all. The conditions of a Warrant of Trade. The powers and trappings of a Warrant of Trade do not come without a cost. A rogue trader fleet might be a significant military force, and the warrant will often come with a number of conditions attached to it. In fact, it would be a sure sign that an individual is being virtually exiled if no conditions were attached, the authorities clearly hoping the recipient will go and get himself killed somewhere beyond their concern. Conditions attached to a warrant may take many forms, but invariably involve some form of military service or intervention. I will now name and explain the most common types of conditions. First, trooping the colors. A common condition under which a warrant is granted is that a particular world be visited by the rogue trader and their fleet. The world may have been isolated for some time, or for whatever reason, simply not visited by any authority of the Imperium in a generation. Perhaps the tithes have been short or slow to be rendered, and the Imperium's bureaucracy has finally decided to investigate matters. If such a world is distant and other more pressing concerns have diverted attention, then it may not be practical to task an administrator mission or Imperial Navy squadron to press home the matter. Instead, a newly appointed rogue trader might very well be required to make a brief layover at the troublesome world. In all likelihood, contact with the planet in question will have been sporadic or non-existent, or concerning and fragmentary communications might be all that have been logged. The rogue trader will be tasked with undertaking the equivalent of a state visit, complete with all the regal pomp and circumstance of a visiting imperial noble. Dress uniforms and badges of office will be flaunted, retinues and honor guards deployed, bands assembled, and flags waved. This is all for show, of course, and is intended to remind the world's leadership in a very real fashion that the Imperium still exists, and has not forgotten about them, or the tithes they owe. The rogue trader will be expected to attend state banquets and high-level talks, acting in essence as a diplomat, even an ambassador of the Imperium. The Imperial commander of most backwater planets will be sufficiently cowed by such a display, particularly with a small fleet of warships in geosynchronous orbit over their seat of power. The trader will be wined and dined and treated as royalty, and given every assurance that any shortfall in the tithe is clearly a minor inconvenience and entirely innocent, and asked to convey the governor's personal assurances that all will be made right as soon as possible. Some imperial planetary governors do not welcome the rogue trader's visit, however, either showing overt resistance or displaying obvious reluctance to comply. In such cases, the trader is required to launch a punitive strike to encourage the recalcitrant world's corporation. Next, punitive strike. In cases where a flag-waving mission has proved unsuccessful, or a world has openly rejected the rule of the Imperium, the rogue trader will have no option but to use force. Few newly appointed traders want to squander their resources on the first bush war they encounter, so a hard-hitting show of force is often used to demonstrate the futility of further resistance. A lance strike from orbit often proves he means business, particularly if aimed at key infrastructure targets, thus weakening the Imperial Governor's ability to rule their planet. Alternatively, a strike against a location particularly valued by the Imperial Commander might change his stance. The destruction of a luxurious winter palace or rural hunting lodge, for example. In the unlikely event that this initial show of force does not prove sufficient, then a more protracted campaign may be required. No rogue trader wishes to become embroiled in such a war, but sometimes it simply cannot be avoided. If the trader's remit extends to actually dethroning the planetary governor in question, then many will proceed to such a cause as soon as possible. This usually ends the matter in short order, a more compliant replacement being selected according to whatever political system put them in power in the first place. Next, settlement. Settlement of new worlds in the name of the God Emperor of mankind may be a condition placed on a Warrant of Trade. The explorator fleets of the Adeptus Mechanicus are ever investigating the wonders of the galaxy, relentlessly recording and cataloguing celestial phenomena and stellar bodies. A report of a habitable world will be dispatched to the Administratum, along with whatever data can be gathered on it by preliminary investigation by an explorator team. If the world proves of no great interest to the tech priests, perhaps because it harbors no resources or life forms of immediate use to them, then its details will be transmitted and filed away for future generations to follow up as they will. The Imperium's bureaucracy being as it is, the report may progress through the data mills of the Administratum for many standard years, even centuries, before finally crossing the desk of a clerk tasked with dispatching settlement missions to such worlds to claim them in the name of mankind. In the span of time between an exploration being logged and a settlement mission being dispatched, any number of fates might have befallen the planet. The ebb and flow of galactic war might have reduced its surface to radioactive dust, or aliens might have claimed it for their own ends. It is not unknown for a rogue trader to arrive in orbit over such a world only to find it utterly uninhabitable, or in fact, incorrectly categorized in the first place. They will then have a colony ship and some thousands of settlers to dispose of, and it is not uncommon for a particularly callous individual to insist the colonies carry out their mission regardless, landing the prefabricated colony units wherever they can, or else. Very few colonies established under such circumstances last more than a standard year. while a very small minority may somehow survive against all the odds, alone in the darkness, out beyond the fringes of Imperial rule. Reclamation. Every year, unrecorded numbers of the Imperium's worlds fall to rebellion, alien invasion, or natural disaster. A common condition of the granting of a warrant is that such worlds be brought back into the fold by the application of overt military power. Such missions are never what could be described as diplomatic, unless a transmission demanding immediate surrender can be counted as an ambassadorial communique. Intelligence on such lost worlds might be incomplete or compromised, based on accounts long out of date or deliberately covered up. The rogue trader will be operating on the level of a Lord Militant, leading an Imperial crusade, and for such missions, additional military forces might be seconded to their command. In some cases, the Space Marines of the Adeptus Astartes might accompany the fleet, usually for a short time only, but occasionally for extended periods. Though they may well act as a figurehead, the rogue trader will not be in direct command of such units, and an administrative body will be formed, often titled a Crusader Council. Strategies and political issues will be debated until the best use of the fleet's assets is agreed upon, calling on all the diplomatic skills of the rogue trader. Each of the seats on such a council is occupied by an individual of considerable power, and no Imperial Navy Admiral, Astra Militarum General, or Space Marine Chapter Master would agree to a course of action that squandered their own resources. The degree of the trader's involvement over the course of such a crusade will depend very much on their own background. An individual of a militant disposition may closely oversee the deployment of the fleet's military forces, while a particularly belligerent one may actually take a hand in the fighting. Those of a more bureaucratic nature are more likely to delegate such matters to their military advisors. There are those traders for whom the entire crusade will represent a massive inconvenience, and these will deal with the situation in their own unique manner, seeking to extricate themselves and their ships from the mission of the crusade so that they can continue on their way for their own ends. And the last condition, exploration. Exploration is the essential mission of all rogue traders, yet occasionally they will be tasked with exploring a particular region of the galaxy at the behest of the Imperium's authorities. There are a lot of reasons such a situation might come about, and many traders will be particularly resentful, as it may be specified that they themselves will not receive the exploitation rights they normally enjoy over the regions they explore. This onerous duty might be the result of the Imperium being in possession of fragmentary knowledge of an unexplored region, which, although incomplete, suggests the presence of some natural resource or otherwise desirable asset that might be of strategic value to an entire segmentum. A long-lost archival record might suggest that a region is populated by isolated human worlds or a spacefaring alien culture. Perhaps something far more sinister lurks in the black spaces on the map. Alien tomb worlds predating the evolution of humanity, esoteric stellar phenomena that challenge the understanding of the most learned of tech priests, or planet-sized super weapons placed as silent sentinels by long-extinct civilizations. All of these things might trigger a rogue trader mission to investigate matters, often accompanied by senior members of the Adeptus Mechanicus or members of the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition. Compliance with the terms of the Warrant of Trade. It may seem at first glance that some newly appointed rogue traders might be tempted to simply sail away into the great unknown without undertaking any of their obligations to the Imperium. Indeed, many are so tempted, and some do try to escape. These individuals soon find out that the Imperium is not so foolish as to allow the trader to get away without first putting in place at least one contingency plan. The most common method of ensuring a trader complies with the conditions of their warrant is to ensure there are very powerful representatives of the Imperium on hand to remind them of their obligations. This might be an administratum prefect, but it might also be an agent of a more obscure division, perhaps even of the Inquisition. On occasion, the rogue trader might find their flotilla accompanied by one or more space marine vessels, and sometimes these will be serving as much as a reminder of the conditions of their warrant as to enforce the power of the Imperium on its enemies. Sometimes the trader's compliance might be guaranteed by more subtle means, such as the promise of further powers or the granting of additional assets at various stages in a voyage. If a rogue trader has to make a number of diversions and fulfill a number of tasks before even reaching the fringes, then they may be reliant on the Imperium to replenish their forces before they leave Imperial space. There might also be more insidious contingencies put in place. Members of a ship's crew could be agents of the Imperium, and it is not unknown for actual assassins to be emplaced aboard a rogue trader's flagship as insurance against non-compliance or betrayal. Lineage. There are two broad classifications of rogue trader: those personally granted the Warrant of Trade and those who have inherited it from a forebear. The granting of a warrant has the potential to establish a hugely powerful noble line, which, if successful, can grow over the generations to become equal to the most ancient of navigator clans and merchant houses. Many of the scions of these houses will hold the title Rogue Trader and wield the authority of the warrant, yet in the main, these powers reside predominantly with the line's titular head. Such individuals must bear the weight of tradition and expectation, and are in the main every bit as driven and able as the ancestor first granted the warrant. On their shoulders rests the duty of maintaining the warrant and their family line's continued existence, driving them to continue the mission of the rogue trader, exploring the benighted regions beyond the fringes and returning with unimagined riches and glory. Some of these houses become split with internal strife, the various scions competing with one another for power and the favor of the line's head. In houses where the head exercises complete control, the various members with a chance of inheriting leadership might squabble and maneuver against one another, some even resorting to intimidation or assassination to ensure it is they, and not an older sibling, who inherits the warrant at the head's passing. Though some houses may become riven with internecine civil war, most will invariably maintain an outward appearance of respectable propriety, lest their competitors sense weakness and move against them. It takes a powerful head of house indeed to maintain order amongst competing offspring, while also furthering the interests of their house and containing any collateral damage. Even in the face of outright rebellion against the Imperium, many heads of rogue trader houses will support their offspring. Scions of the rogue trader houses. So that the sons and daughters of the oldest dynasties do not fall victim to a life of idle luxury, and thus weaken the bloodline, many such scions are ordered by their sires to do their time, undertaking a career in one of the Imperium's great institutions until such time as they are judged worthy of returning, or duty calls them back. Many serve in the Imperial Navy, a career that affords them many of the skills they will one day need to command the rogue trader fleet. Others spend time on the general staff of the Astra Militarum, or in other divisions such as the Administratum. Such individuals are often reviled by their peers within the imperial hierarchy, who view them merely as treading water until their privileged birthright recalls them. But many do indeed learn vital skills that will one day serve them and their house well. The revocation and forfeiture of a Warrant of Trade. Some rogue traders become so powerful that their interests come into conflict with those of the Imperium. Considering the enormous freedom granted by the Warrant of Trade, it takes a great deal for a rogue trader's actions to be considered beyond the legal scope of their powers. The authorities often overlook even the most questionable actions, even if word does get back to Tada, so long as the Imperium's best interests are served. Yet there are circumstances that have in the past led to the revocation of the Warrant of Trade, and the forfeiture of the great powers associated with it. Revocation means the effective death of a rogue trader line, its powers and privileges lost for all time. Some houses have continued in a much diminished state, slowly rebuilding what fortunes they have clung to. I will now name a few reasons for such a revocation. The first, empire building. Throughout the ages, some notable rogue trader houses have amassed such powers that they have become small stellar empires, controlling entire regions beyond the fringes of the Imperium. This in itself is not contrary to the terms of the granting of the Warrant of Trade, so long as fealty is paid in the form of due tithes to the Imperium. Such is human nature, however, that hubris and greed has got the better of some, and they have determined to take total power of the realms they have conquered. Although it may be some time before reports of the actions of such individuals reach Terra, and more time yet before they are acted upon, Such traitors will invariably suffer the wrath of the Imperium, with an Imperial crusade fleet, sometimes even one led by a newly appointed rogue trader, being dispatched to crush them. Next, acting against the Imperium. Being free to deal with alien cultures, many traders deal or ally themselves with the Xenos in the course of their missions. It is not unknown for some individuals to become embroiled in local wars, and on occasions, these have been against the Imperium. Perhaps they were acting to protect their own interests, moving against a competitor with lethal force. If the interests are aliens and the competitors human, then the trader may well find themselves on the wrong side in a war that soon escalates far and above a trade dispute. Furthermore, many of them actually enjoy the vicious cut and thrust of competitive trade, immersing themselves in the politics of interstellar commerce. While most are highly accomplished at such games, even they can become mired in a bad deal, or find themselves double-bluffed and outmaneuvered by a competitor. Before they know it, they are forced to act against the interests of the Imperium, and find themselves the target of the Emperor's retribution. Next, consorting with the Xenos Terribilus. Although the prescriptions that bar most human contact with aliens do not apply to rogue traders, there are those Xenos pronounced so dangerous, vile, or otherwise undesirable that not even they are permitted contact with them. Entire star systems are declared perdita, their outer limits marked by sentinel buoys that transmit warnings to vessels to turn back, on the authority of the Segmentum High Command or even the Inquisition. Few know what horrors lurk on the world beyond the Sentinels, or what detestable alien life forms call them home. Many a rogue trader has allowed their curiosity to get the better of them, and those few that have survived contact with the prescribed Xenos have later faced the wrath of the Inquisition and forfeiture of their Warrant of Trade. And the last, overstepping the bounds. It is worth remembering that a rogue trader flotilla is a sizable military force in its own right, certainly carrying sufficient firepower to raze to ashes many of the Imperium's worlds. While a single vessel making a return to the Imperium will rarely cause concern, an entire fleet often will. Combine this with the fact that many of the Imperium's institutions have good reason to be distrustful of rogue traders, and a potential flashpoint emerges. To the Imperial Navy, a large fleet appearing at the borders of a sector without warning will be sufficient to scramble a large force to ascertain its intentions and ensure it does not initiate hostile actions. The annals of the Imperium contain many unfortunate incidents, in which one such fleet, returning victorious from a decades-long expedition, has returned unheralded to the Imperium, only to become embroiled with an Imperial Navy battle group. Such incidents might be cause to forfeit the warrant, if the rogue trader is still alive at the end. And now, for the last and final part, the rewards. The rewards a rogue trader's Warrant of Trade can bring are exceptional, and often quite beyond those attainable by any other legitimate means within Imperial space. The greatest reward is fortune, obtained by trade or conquest. Often the two are one and the same. Quite aside from the financial gain, many traders seek the fame and glory success can bring. Few individuals in the 41st millennium can ever hope that their name will be spoken of beyond the limits of their birth world or the span of their own lifetime. For many, the most valuable reward is the opportunity to establish a lineage, with themselves as the primogenitors of an imperial noble house that will endure throughout the ages. The Rogue Trader Archetypes. Whatever the background of any given rogue trader, he or she will be possessed of a quite exceptional drive to succeed and to prosper. These men and women stand above the teeming masses of the Imperium, the sheer force of their personality propelling them to achieve great things in service to the Imperium and themselves. Often, these personality tropes are intrinsically linked to their background, but not always. Sometimes, a rogue trader will transcend his roots, defying his background and only displaying his true nature once out amongst the unexplored regions of space. First up, the Scoundrel, or better known as the Rogue Trader. I'm sorry, Senior Arbiter, you must have me confused with someone else. I'm no petty criminal, I'm a legitimate businessman with legitimate business interests, and if you doubt me, I have a certain document to show you. From a rogue trader and suspected smuggler, Havelock Blackheel. Many rogue traders are scoundrels of the worst order, despite all the trappings of power they display. Such individuals carry themselves with swaggering self-assurance, and through long practice are able to bluff their way into the courts of kings and the bedchambers of princesses with equal panache. The scoundrel looks to turn every possible situation to his own personal advantage, and will often take risks others would find reckless, gambling with his own life and those of all his servants. Violence is rarely the first option for such rogue traders, and they often maintain a mask of self-effacing amiability. Beneath this facade lurks a keen mind and a skilled warrior able to take on most enemies and win. Some of them combine bravado with daring, often leading expeditions to newly discovered worlds in person. Leading a small retinue of trusted associates, they get themselves in all manner of entanglements, but always seem to escape relatively unharmed, invariably carrying some priceless artifact that will seal their fortune. Others turn their vessels into privateers, enjoying a career as a buccaneer preying on the shipping of alien empires and human rivals. The Merchant Prince. Merchant Prince rogue traders are entirely consumed by the quest for riches, gained not by the crude application of threats or violence, but the shrewdly negotiated contract. The Merchant Prince seeks to establish the most lucrative of trading contracts, ensuring that the other party benefits from the deal, but not nearly so much as he does. Merchant rogue traders will go to great lengths to avoid military action, believing it a waste of resources. Yet they have no qualms about employing the trappings of military power as an aid to negotiations when necessary. Furthermore, none of them would be so foolish as to neglect the defenses of their assets, and the merchant princes understand the value of their resources better than most. They will, as such, take great steps to protect their investments against competitors and pirates, and maintain the very best personal guards. The merchant rogue trader seeks to establish vast networks of profit, negotiating exclusive trading rights throughout the regions he explores. This has, on occasion, landed such individuals in conflict with the Imperium's authorities, as the rogue trader deals with aliens he should destroy, or allows long-lost human civilizations to remain lost to all bar him, so that he has exclusive access to the archaeotech that is so valued by the Adeptus Mechanicus and coveted by the idle rich of the Imperium's noble houses. The Explorer. There are plenty of rogue traders for whom the greatest drive is the simple joy of pushing back the boundaries of the Imperium, filling in the blank spaces on the maps. These men and women are ceaselessly inquisitive and often highly intelligent, a combination of traits not generally encouraged in the Imperium's servants. Yet, such a combination often proves ideal in a rogue trader, and those few who attain such rank often prove highly successful recipients of the Warrant of Trade. To the explorer, the most hostile of environments is a challenge to be faced head-on, and the most fearsome of slavering alien beasts is a fascinating opportunity for study and interaction, or sometimes autopsy. The explorer is ever keen to don an envirosuit and plunge headlong into the most dangerous or bizarre of alien landscapes. Despite the risks they take, often without even realizing the danger, many of these explorers appear to be watched over by the Emperor himself. They somehow survive encounters in nightmare-infested Death World jungles or haunted alien tomb worlds when others would have fled screaming. Rogue traders of this type often delegate the less stimulating aspects of their rank to their underlings or associates. The master-at-arms of such a rogue trader may find himself exasperated as he time and again finds himself rescuing the trader from danger, while the ship's factotum will have to carry the burden of maintaining the trader's fortune. The explorer is often far more concerned with following some obscure archival reference to a lost world of alien wonders than he is with the responsibilities that come with being the head of a largely mercantile rogue trader house. The Missionary. The Missionary believes in the literal truth of the Imperial Creed when it states that mankind is the sole inheritor of the galaxy and that all the other intelligent races are merely squatters on worlds that belong to the Imperium as a result of this divinely inspired manifest destiny. He seeks out lost human colonies to bring to them the word of the Imperial truth, and he goes to great lengths to convert, often forcibly, those he sees as benighted by ignorance of the God Emperor. Rogue traders of this ilk are often granted the Warrant of Trade to conquer regions that have resisted the attentions of the Missionaria Galaxia, the arm of the Adeptus Ministorum tasked with the propagation of the Imperial Creed. Yet they are more than ranting demagogues, and what sets them above the itinerant preachers of the Missionarius is a drive to profit as well as to preach. They see the establishment of profitable commerce with recontacted human societies as part of the great scheme put in motion when the Emperor first went out into the stars 10,000 standard years ago during the Great Crusade and found human societies lost for millennia from a prior age of exploration and settlement. It is his mission to bring such people back into the fold, and the establishment of the Imperial Creed is the first essential step in that process. The missionary rogue trader suffers the Xenos poorly, seeing little or no value in establishing profitable trading relationships with alien worlds. More likely, he will seek to suppress such cultures and limit their influence, ensuring their alien creeds do not spread to taint the hearts of men. Such rogue traders are often accompanied on their voyages by an army of ecclesiarchy representatives, who he will make every effort to establish on any lost human worlds he discovers. The Diplomat. The Diplomat seeks to spread the influence of the Imperium wherever he may, expanding its power to encompass the entirety of navigable space. He is a pragmatist, knowing that some alien species must be tolerated, even supported, while others must be crushed. The tools of his trade are words as well as weapons, and he is adept at negotiating with even the most belligerent societies, whether human or alien. Such traders often find themselves in conflict with other imperial interests, particularly those who condemn Xenos as worthy only of annihilation. Yet he believes that it is he alone who sees the wider truth, knowing that mankind is assailed by countless foes and that some alliances must be made if the Imperium is to prevail in an ultimately hostile universe. It is the Diplomat who is able to gain the confidence of the inscrutable Eldar, earning such trust as to be allowed to set foot on their craft worlds. It is he who may turn the path of alien invasion, negotiating a truce that allows both parties to extricate themselves from a war neither would ultimately stand to gain from. Despite his skill with words, the Diplomat has an innate understanding of when they will serve no purpose and when weapons must be used instead. He has the instinctive ability to size up his foes, often upon first contact, gauging the true intention behind their words and actions. When necessary, he will open fire first and open negotiations later, and that is ultimately the secret to his success. The Psychopath. Some individuals are little more than madmen, creatures of instinct and slaves to their own desires. Some would claim that any man who has attained such high rank as to be awarded the Warrant of Trade must harbor within himself something of this trade. Regardless of his background or personality type, any rogue trader could be called upon to order the extermination of an entire race, or the destruction of an entire world. All such men, it is sometimes said, must be psychopathic to a greater or lesser degree, regardless of the facade behind which such a trait is hidden. Some surrender themselves entirely to their inner darkness, dispensing their own personal brand of imperial justice and retribution as they penetrate the outer darkness. They deal with those they come into contact with according to their own shattered moral compass. They are as likely to take personal control over a rediscovered human society as they are to devastate it from orbit, and are often capricious and unpredictable, with a habit of dismissing subordinates for the slightest of misdeeds, whether real or imagined. Many such underlings are invited to make their own way back to Imperial territory, the lucky ones in a lifeboat, the unlucky ones on foot via an airlock. Many of these wild and murderous individuals are highly idiosyncratic in their methods and the style in which they interpret and enact their mission amongst the stars. They might style themselves after figures of legend, some even comparing themselves to the Emperor's primarchs and seeking to emulate the deeds of the Great Crusade in which the Imperium was forged 10,000 standard years ago. Some give themselves and their vessels ridiculously grand titles, such as Grand Conqueror, Emperor's Light, or Scourge of Xenos. With wanton enthusiasm, they wage war on any and all they consider to be an enemy of the Imperium. Some spend a lifetime out beyond the fringes, laying waste to Emperor knows how many worlds, while others return periodically to the Imperium, announcing their deeds and expecting all manner of grand receptions and official ceremonies. Quite a few take on one foe too many, and simply disappear from the annals of the Imperium's history. And the last archetype, the Trader Militant. The Warrant of Trade is a potent document, not only allowing rogue traders to trade beyond the bounds of the Imperium and operate beyond Imperial oversight, but also make war in the Emperor's name. While many traders make use of a minor war or conflict at some point in their careers, some favor war over all other endeavors. These bloodthirsty rogue traders are commonly known by the general populace of the Imperium as Traders Militant, and their warrant is often referred to by their fellows as a Warlord Warrant. These Traders Militant behave in a similar fashion as a senior Imperial military commander. Their warrant sanctions them to conscript and equip great numbers of men, to maintain these men under arms in addition to their private house troops, to contract with mercenary corps, and even enlist the aid of Astra Militarum, Imperial Navy, or Adeptus Astartes units. And the average Trader Militant makes good use of these capabilities. A true Trader Militant is a rare breed, however. Though their warrants may technically allow them the right to requisition troops, the reality is many Imperial governors and senior members of the Imperial Adepta have the political and military power to resist these requests. Therefore, Traders Militant tend to be either rogue traders who already possess great wealth and political power of their own, or proven and reliable former servants of the Imperium, such as high-ranking Imperial Guard and Imperial Navy officers granted a warrant of trade for their deeds. The Trappings of Power. Along with the warrant to act outside of the Imperium's laws, the Warrant of Trade often comes with a great many trappings attached to it. While many rogue traders have significant resources of their own to call upon, they are usually given command over an entire fleet and ground forces to aid them in their mission beyond the fringes. If he is not already in possession of a void ship by dint of current rank, a newly appointed rogue trader may be given a flagship, often a cruiser. Every vessel in the Imperium's registry is a precious asset, and capital ships are not squandered, for they take solar decades, even entire Terran centuries, to construct in the Mechanicus's orbital shipyards, and can tie up the equivalent of many years' worth of planetary industrial output. Nonetheless, the appointment of a rogue trader is an event of great import, and the Imperial authorities would not, or not often, wish a new recipient of the warrant to fall to pirate attacks the instant he or she sets out. The Imperium expects great things of its rogue traders, and will make every effort to ensure that they are equipped for the dangerous mission they will face. Alongside a flagship, they may be accompanied by frigates and other escorts, as well as a multitude of cargo vessels, tenders, processing or refining vessels, and many more auxiliaries. If they are not already versed in the skills needed to command a fleet, and have not appointed a servant who is, then the authorities will find one qualified to handle the day-to-day running of the flotilla. Most rogue traders are the sort of people who want to take total, personal command of their fleets, and will soon learn the skills needed to do so. Those who do not tend not to live very long in the perilous regions of the galaxy beyond the fringes of Imperial rule. Other significant assets gifted to them may include ground troops. Entire Imperial Guard regiments may be seconded to them, along with all the auxiliary support units needed to maintain them, and advisors to aid in their use and deployment. Though such gifts are considered temporary attachments, in reality it is likely to prove permanent. Rogue traders are expected to meet any threat that waits in the dark, and the Imperial Guard is often at the sharp end of such conflicts, and so unlikely to be returned to serve elsewhere even if the soldiers survive such service. Some of the traders issue such troops uniforms of their own design, and it is not uncommon for attached Imperial Guard units to wear a tabard or sash over their regular uniforms, bearing the colors and heraldry of their new lord and master. In addition to military forces, a rogue trader may be provided with a vast army of bureaucrats, administrators, clerks, artisans, and advisors drawn from the ranks of the administratum. These are intended to serve the needs of administrating any worlds conquered in the course of the fleet's travels. Plenty of trader fleets are furthermore accompanied by entire populations of colonists, volunteers or otherwise, who will settle newly discovered worlds so that the Imperium's borders are expanded from one generation to the next. In some cases, the rogue trader will install relatives or trusted followers as a new ruling class, ensuring the new colony owes fealty to him as well as to the Imperium. The Rogue Trader Dynasties. A rogue trader and his team are more than merely a ship's captain and his crew. They are a grand legacy, which often stretches back hundreds or even thousands of standard years. The first rogue traders in the days of the Great Crusade were given mandates to ply the stars and expand the control and reach of the Emperor, and in exchange they could harvest the wealth such freedom would bring. Today's rogue traders are the descendants of these first ones, and the many that have come after. All of those that serve in their crew, not just the rogue trader, will be part of this dynasty. This legacy is important for crew members to remember, as they need to know that they are more than the ordinary Imperial citizen. They are rare individuals, chosen for greatness, who possess power to shape the very destiny of the Imperium itself. It is also a source of great pride for those members of a rogue trader's crew to know that they are a cut above the average citizen, gifted with special rights and blessed with a favored role in the Emperor's grand designs. Part of this status that all the crew members share also means that, to a degree, they are all equally important. Though ultimately, the rogue trader controls the ship, the main decisions that affect it, and its course into the void. It is his crew that are equally essential in playing a role in the destiny of the rogue trader's dynasty. Child of Dynasty. Within the Imperium of Man, there are those who sit at the pinnacle of power, the nobility and the ruling elite. As the Imperium is structured as a feudal society, it stands to reason that within it exist many types of noble houses, including planetary rulers, military lords, and the rogue traders. Over time, once the Warrant of Trade has been given, a rogue trader may find that his empire is growing. The dynasty now has fleets of starships, planetary fiefdoms, and thousands of house soldiers to call upon. As time goes on and the family continues to grow, it develops into a dynasty, able to command scores of voidcraft and countless troops. This legacy spans the Imperium and beyond. To ensure that this legacy continues, the lords and ladies of the dynasty designate an heir apparent in whatever fashion is deemed appropriate by their customs. These sons and daughters may find themselves struggling for the favor of their dynastic leaders in an effort to be worthy of succession. Oftentimes in imperial noble families, the second, third, and even fourth child finds themselves with little option but to go out and make a name for themselves, or simply languish in obscurity, hoping that circumstances arise to change their fate. However, this is not the case in rogue trader families, where all are expected to work and prove themselves. It is oftentimes that these noble scions end up plotting and scheming for ways to maneuver into a position where the family leader has little choice but to name them heir. Life as a child of Dynasty. The children of the rogue trader houses are instructed in all manner of subjects, mundane and esoteric. They are assigned the best tutors and mentors the clan can afford, and by the time the child enters adolescence, they are capable enough to be sent out into the wider galaxy, typically with bodyguard entourage in tow. They have been afforded every advantage, as the future of their house rests upon their shoulders. Not every heir apparent turns out to be the best choice for the family, however. Some are lazy, shiftless souls who do nothing more than squander the family fortunes and pass their days in decadence and perversion. In such cases, the leaders of these dynasties often select more than one heir to the throne. It is a gamble they make to ensure that at least one of them survives to continue the dynasty. Their heirs are often assigned one of the family's void ships under the command of one of their most capable captains, or a family scion that has more days behind him than ahead. They are then given a stipend and sent to learn about the unforgiving galaxy. Some return upon their majority to assume the title they have been ordained for. Others are never seen or heard from again. Oftentimes, a rival family member covets the throne of the house at the expense of all else. These miserable sods plot and scheme the downfall of their siblings and relatives. They may arrange an accident to befall other heirs, so that they alone remain to assume the family's leadership. Thus, many heirs, especially from the larger dynasties, are told to be wary and look out for such plots. Many surround themselves with capable allies and protectors, but in the end, survival often comes down to their own wits and instincts. Many learn not only the intricacies of political longevity, but martial arts and other forms of combat as well. This is by far the best means to ensure they live long enough to return home and assume the privileges and rank that they have been groomed all their lives for. Waging war. War is the natural state of man, for it is in battle that he has made his greatest achievements. It is at the heart of every endeavor, and those who claim otherwise are doomed to die on the same swords they decry. Attributed to Saint Drusus. The ability to successfully wage war is crucial to the survival of a rogue trader as surely as are his skills in business, diplomacy, and void-faring. It is the strong arm and the implicit threat of violence that lend weight to a man's words in the Imperium. Indeed, in a place as lawless and God-Emperor forsaken as the Colonus expands, a rogue trader's martial prowess is often the only measure by which others judge him. Knowing this, a wise trader studies war with the same fervor as he studies markets and currencies. He knows the value of war to the nearest throne, understanding that the true cost of war is reflected in more than banking ledgers and casualty lists. They must be able to weigh every factor in war, from costs and benefits to the social and political ramifications. This is what sets a rogue trader apart from a common chartist captain or business concern. He has the ability to raise an army and a fleet of ships to carry it, and the legal, moral, and ethical backing of the administratum that allows him to use them as he sees fit. This makes him unique among his peers. Unique and dangerous, for the rights and responsibilities granted in a warrant of trade, especially those pertaining to waging war in the name of the God Emperor, can be so easily and so tragically misused. Warfare is an intricate dance is full of ever-shifting alliances and uncertain futures, and is not to be entered into lightly. When committed, a rogue trader must pursue it with all of the strength, courage, and violence that he can muster. Only then will he see the fruits of his violent labors. Taking part in a war, whether as a belligerent or simply an interested party, is expensive, risky, deadly, and has brought ruin to more rogue trader houses than can be counted. Why then do so many pursue it? The answers to these questions are as varied and as telling as the men and women who give them. There is no constant, no prescribed list of conditions that can decide when waging a war is prudent or not. One thing is for certain, though. While the benefits of waging war can be truly staggering, and may make a man a king, the cost of failure is always death. Whether true death, or the myriad of little deaths like humiliation, loss of power, loss of wealth, or even enslavement. These are all important issues to keep in mind when approaching war, though they are by no means the only ones, and it is a fool who disregards their importance. Reasons for war. Wars have been fought throughout the eons for any number of reasons, and in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, this is especially true. Whether for conquest, faith, or simply business, there are any number of reasons to pursue war, such as the War of Conquest. Wars of conquest are military endeavors wherein the attacker seeks to subjugate an enemy through sheer force of arms. They are waged mainly to acquire some sort of prize, typically land and natural resources, but oftentimes also slaves or some other form of wealth held by the defenders. Since the goal is the occupation of enemy lands, the subjugation of its people, and the exploitation of their resources, wars of conquest are infinitely complex. They require better planning, larger and longer-term commitments, and perhaps more finesse than wholesale slaughter. They also have a permanency about them, for once an invading force enters a land for conquest, they are typically there to stay. Rogue traders rarely take part in wars of conquest, at least not as the conqueror. Wars of this type tend to tie a man to a single place and make him responsible for a whole lot of sedentary, ground-based activities like reconstruction, defense, and subjugation. As this is anathema to many free-wheeling rogue traders who typically prefer the bridge of a void ship to the halls of government. They tend to take ancillary roles in other people's wars of conquest, supplying weapons and material, providing monetary or temporary military backing in the form of void ships and house troops, establishing logistics chains, and smuggling have made many a fortune during a larger conflict. A war of faith. By far, the single most common reason to wage war throughout the Imperium of Man. The religious war is perhaps also the easiest to justify. The opening salvo of many a bloody campaign has come on the tail of the phrase, "The God Emperor wills it." Indeed, it could be said that the justification for all wars the Imperium embarks on are, at their heart, fueled by zealous piety, or at least draped in its trappings. These are just wars. Wars based on ecclesiastical doctrine whose atrocities and crimes are justified, even called for, by the God Emperor himself. The reasons behind them rarely matter, even to the generals and admirals commanding the vast imperial military forces. For them, it is enough that the Emperor wills it, and so it shall be done. Due to the nature of the imperial creed, wars of faith may be waged against any who oppose the rightful rule of the Imperium of Man, be they alien, heretic, or rebel. However, the Imperium reserves a special hatred for one foe: the forces of the Ruinous Powers. These wars can be faster and more intense than any other wars, although this is by no means a guarantee. Since their goal is simply destruction more than conquest, they usually end when the aggressor has either wiped out the heathens and heretics, converted them, or taught them a sufficiently hard lesson. Afterwards, the aggressor will leave behind some religious officials and missionaries to see that their work stuck and that their new converts remain on the narrow path. Garrisons of troops may be left behind as well to keep peace and enforce new doctrines, but the majority of the invading forces will be withdrawn to their bases, leaving the rest of the work to the priests and adepts. Due to their relative quickness, high potential for gain, and the ease with which a person can get an enemy labeled a heretic in the Imperium, religious wars are quite popular among rogue traders. Whether based on true religious fervor or simply used as a convenient excuse, many a rogue trader has waged war with conspicuous displays of prayer and breast-beating. Unlike wars of conquest, in which they tend to take secondary roles, they often take a very active and enthusiastic role in religious wars. What better way is there to prove your piety than by killing the enemies of the God Emperor? Indeed, many warrants of trade specifically call for the wielder to make war amongst the heretics and bring his holy light to the godless heathens at the furthest reaches of space. Xenocide. Xenocide, similar in theory to its cousin genocide, is the act of waging war for the sole purpose of completely eradicating an intelligent alien species. To the Imperium, xenocide is accepted and even advocated as a religious imperative of humanity, and is yet another common mandate dictated to rogue traders by the Warrants of Trade. While not all of them are compelled to pursue campaigns of xenocide in their warrants, nearly all are expected to assist Imperial forces in campaigns against Xenos. While all of them tacitly agree to this upon receipt of their warrants, in practice it is a different matter altogether. Away from the watchful eyes of the Imperium, many a pragmatic rogue trader has turned his back on human settlements besieged by Xenos when the cost of assisting outweighed the benefits of leaving their fellow humans to their fates. The Defensive War. A true defensive war is waged in answer to an aggressor's attack. Of course, many warmongers would have it believed that their wars are defensive wars. They justify their aggression by real or imagined threats, but their wars are predicated on a desire for wealth, land, and power. A true defensive war is fought to deny the enemy territory or resources, and often there is little reward save the preservation of what one already possesses. The ongoing defense of the Cadian Gate in the Cadian sector against the Black Crusades of Chaos is one example of a defensive war, as is the recent war fought on the world of Damaris against the Orc invaders. While those fighting a defensive war are typically caught flat-footed in the early stages of the conflict, they will have certain advantages over their attackers due to fighting on familiar ground, being closer to supply lines, and even the knowledge that they must win or perish. Due to the smaller potential profits of a defensive war, it is not something rogue traders get involved with often. However, the potential rewards in both finances and reputation for coming to the aid of an embattled people should never be overlooked. The reputation of the Esme Corda changed from pirate and backguard to hero of the Imperium almost overnight, after that rogue trader participated in the destruction of the space hulk Cauldron of Savagery in 673 M40. War as distraction. What better way to cover illicit activities and shady dealings than with a bloody armed conflict? As heinous as it may sound to some, inciting war for purposes of misdirection and obfuscation can be a perfectly legitimate, if perhaps slightly underhanded, business practice. A war pursued by way of distraction is often fought by proxies. Thanks to their usual business dealings, rogue traders often have a ready supply of mercenaries and hired thugs that they can call upon for just such an occasion. While the hirelings sow discord and fomenting armed conflict, the trader can go about their business. This is war by proxy. Sometimes they must wage a war, but cannot be seen to have done so. When they need some dirty work done, and it is either inconvenient or impolitic to get dirt on their own hands, there are plenty of private military organizations in Imperial space more than willing to do it for them, including other rogue traders. War by proxy is a war fought on behalf of one party, typically unknown to the actual combatants and hired through numerous cutouts and front organizations, by professional mercenaries or other agents. While it can be a clean, expedient way to wage war, the risks of doing so should not be underestimated. Without direct control of events, such wars have a way of spiraling out of control, possibly hampering the very goals they were supposed to obtain. War profiteering. Sometimes it is more profitable to supply a war than it is to fight it. War profiteering is as old as the act of war itself, and much like war, is both lauded and detested. War profiteers are individuals or groups who make their profits by selling important material to belligerents in an armed conflict, and can range from a guardsman selling the las gun of a dead comrade to the manufactoria of the Calixis sector, such as the Merover Combine, Loy Metalworks, and Lindworm Armory. Although war profiteering is typically thought of as the selling of weapons, fighting vehicles, and other wartime impedimenta, the need for any valuable commodity can be exploited for profit in times of war. Medical supplies, foodstuffs, and raw materials all tend to be in high demand in a war zone. It is not unheard of for a canny war profiteer to sell his wares to both sides of a conflict. There have even been cases of war profiteers instigating armed conflicts for the sole purpose of supplying arms and resources to the belligerents involved, at wartime prices, of course. Rogue traders are adept at war profiteering. They are well placed to buy commodities low, ship them to willing war zones, and sell them for a tidy profit to all comers. In fact, the business of making war a business is many a rogue trader dynasty's core dealings. Mustering troops. Almost anything can be bought for the right amount of thrones, including everything a military-minded entrepreneur needs to wage war. When a rogue trader goes about the business of raising troops for war, he has three options: raise the troops and form units himself, hire established mercenary groups, or officially acquire forces of the Imperium's military through the exercise of his warrant. Each has costs and benefits which must be carefully weighed before they can gather men to their flag. Forming units from the ground up gives them complete control over the composition of their forces, but is costly and time-consuming. The rogue trader must enlist or draft the troops, then procure their weapons, armor, vehicles, equipment, food, uniforms, and shelter. This process can take months or even years, and thus is usually undertaken only by the wealthy. Hiring mercenaries is simpler, especially in the Colonus Expanse, where plenty of individual warriors or mercenary bands can be bought. Money spent on mercenaries is money spent on a known quantity. Mercenary companies get work by reputation and word of mouth, so a prospective employer typically knows what he is getting for his thrones. Unfortunately, reliable mercenaries are seldom cheap. Finally, some rogue trader warrants allow the bearer to requisition units of the Imperial Guard. Though this may seem appealing, such concepts often work better in theory rather than in practice. Units are often unavailable for one reason or another, and a local Imperial governor may find it convenient to ignore a rogue trader's request rather than give up well-trained and well-equipped soldiers. As Imperial governors are as politically powerful as many rogue traders, this obstacle can prove insurmountable, no matter what their warrant says. Now, the Battle Brothers of the Adeptus Astartes are arguably the finest warriors in the galaxy. While ancient treaties compel them to aid the Imperium in times of need, few such treaties exist between the Adeptus Astartes and rogue traders in such far-flung regions of the galaxy as the Colonus expands. That being said, it is not unheard of for Space Marine chapters to assist them in times of war, especially when the need is great or their goals are aligned. Outfitting forces. Once the units are assembled, the second step of going to war involves equipping them. While hired mercenaries and Imperial Guard units blessedly come with their own weapons, vehicles, and other material, when a rogue trader raises a unit from scratch, he will find himself acting as both warlord and supply officer. Troops need a dizzying array of supplies to operate effectively. Along with weapons, vehicles, and armor, units also need food, medical supplies, tools, field equipment, uniforms, and all manner of accoutrement to keep them in top shape. This represents a massive outlay of thrones, typically more than was spent to hire the men. Rogue traders outfitting troops have two options available to them to keep costs down: purchasing in bulk or lowering quality. A soldier is only as effective as the equipment he is issued. While some military scholars will argue otherwise, claiming that superior training can overcome inferior equipment, it does not matter how good an infantryman's training has been, if his last gun will not shoot and his armor is in tatters. Unfortunately, sacrifices often need to be made when outfitting large units, and soldiers usually have to make do with what they have been given. Now, for the last part: transporting and deploying forces. To war, to death, and to the God Emperor. A traditional toast among mercenary forces. Once a force has been mustered and equipped, all that is left is to move it where it is needed and deploy it to the battlefield. This will involve specifically configured void ships to transport all the men and material, escorts to protect them, and shuttles, landing craft or drop pods to ferry everything from orbit to a planetary surface. Once on the surface, units are assumed to have with them the appropriate vehicles, such as tanks, fighter craft, or riding beasts, as fits their unit, as these were acquired during the outfitting stage. If the rogue traders' troops do not have the necessary ships and aircraft on hand, or cannot acquire them easily from their dynasty, they will need to contract for their forces' passage. Their best choice would be an ally, colleague, or chartist captain who specializes in hauling troops. Their ships will already be configured as troop carriers. They are trustworthy and can typically be had for the price of some favors. Failing that, their next best bet is a private military company, specializing in what is known in the business as void lift work, the profession of transporting men and material from war zone to war zone. It is important to note that the Imperial Navy may or may not be willing to aid in void transport. This usually depends on a rogue trader's warrant and relations with the Navy, as an admiral is more likely to aid a respected trader than one who is practically a pirate. However, traders are noble peers of the Imperium, and their ability to requisition aid includes the Imperial Navy. However, the Navy is unlikely to transport non-Imperial or Xenos forces.